Good morning. I'm Leanne Wood, president of Flying Camel PR, and your host of the KBIS Next Stage. We're ready for the next panel. As the size of our industry grows, so does the carbon footprint. The kitchen and bath industry can significantly contribute to a circular economy, and it's time that we all did our part. The next panel will explore how we can all work together to accomplish this. One of the leading brands paving the way in pursuit of responsible design and manufacturing is Cosentino, and we're thrilled to have them as a sponsor of this panel today. Representing Cosentino is Patty Dominguez, Vice President, Architect and Design Sales. Patty is going to provide a short introduction to the amazing sustainable practices to which Cosentino is committed, and then she will introduce our panel of experts. Please help me welcome Patty Dominguez to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I am Patty Dominguez, and for those of you that are not familiar with Cosentino, Cosentino is a family-owned company, and we manufacture stone out of a small village in Macael in Spain, and we produce all kinds of different types of solid surfaces and surfaces for all of your needs. I'm very excited to be with you, and especially for this really impressive panel that we have today, and to talk about something that is very near to us at Cosentino, which is sustainable practices in our industry. In fact, responsible practices and sustainability has not been something that Cosentino is just now aware of. This is not because it became a buzzword. This is actually because of something that we believe in our family business, and our president, Paco Cosentino, has been dear to his heart for many years. As a matter of fact, if you come to Macael, which is our village, we are surrounded by quarries. And when we first started the launch of silestone back in 1990, the reason silestone came to life was because of us investigating how we could reuse what we had in our quarries. That was the beginning of our launch of silestone, which then became revolutionary at that time. After that, we launched a product called Decton in 2013. Decton is an ultra-compact surface, and it's also groundbreaking, and it became a groundbreaking product due to its sustainability and highly durable, resistant to stains and scratches, and great for both indoor and outdoor spaces. Just last year, we announced a major development that we're extremely proud about. Hopefully you have heard some about it, and if not, I invite you to come to our booth and hear more about Hybric Plus. Hybric Plus has been a research that we have been researching on this technology for endless hours. We've spent over 12 million euros to come up with a technology that would bring silestone the same durability, the same beauty, the components that it has. It's as strong as it always has been, and now it's a sustainable product with Hybric Plus. One of the main things about Hybric is that we use 100% renewable electric energy, 20% recycled raw materials in its composition, and it allows something very important to us, to become much safer to the entire value chain, as the presence of crystalline silica is significantly reduced. And this, for us, in terms of sustainability and in terms of our health, of our planet, and of our people, is something that Cosentino's values are incredibly important. So this is just the beginning of Cosentino's growth and development with innovation, and always with people and with our planet. So, without further ado, I would like to start by introducing our panel that will drive us into this incredible conversation today, that I believe is something that everyone should be aware of, is becoming more and more aware of, and that I am privileged enough to say that as a member of the American Society of Interior Designers that sit on their national board, we, along with Metropolis Magazine, have taken a pledge to the Sustainability Pledge, which you'll hear more about. So first, let me introduce to you Gary Wheeler, our dear friend and CEO of the American Society of Interior Designers, who is a renowned professional with more than 30 years of design experience and a great friend. Gary? Next up, we have David Burns, founder and CEO of Refined Kitchens, which is a zero-waste residential design firm specializing in the deconstruction and repurposing of luxury kitchens and baths. Using reclaimed and custom casework, countertops, and appliances, the company designs spaces that satisfies people, planet, and pocketbook. He also is a 2020 NKVA 30 Under 30 recipient, which must mean he's my age. Just kidding. David? Thank you. Our next panelist is Valentin Tijeras. Valentin is our Senior Executive Vice President of Research and Product Development at Cosentino. Valentin has been with Cosentino for 16 years and is responsible for the development and the management of new products and technology, which include introducing the most sustainable, innovative, and beautiful materials in the quartz surfaces, engineered stone industry. And I'm not just being biased, but Valentin is also one that puts his heart into what he does, rolls up the sleeves, and has allowed us to launch this incredible product, which is Hybrid Plus with Silestone. So with that, Valentin. And finally, today's moderator, another dear friend of Cosentino's, Avi Rajagopal. He is the editor-in-chief of Metropolis, an award-winning architecture and design publication. Avi is a frequent speaker at interior design, architecture, and urbanism events, and is an advocate for sustainable architecture and design. Avi has been a leader and a leader in this particular topic. We have been privileged to work with him for the last 2 years, unfortunately, in Zoom, and today we get to be with him in person. So thank you for being here, Avi. And with that, I will pass it on to our wonderful panel. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Usually, unfortunately, when we start to talk about sustainability, if you've ever been in a discussion around sustainability before, it usually starts with a litany of bad news. So I'm going to apologize for starting your day off talking about some pretty bad news for all of us in the world. But today what we're going to discuss is how we can turn that negative into a positive, and what power you have, all of you in the design industry who are involved with homes, with kitchens, with baths, with interiors, whatever your role might be in the industry, what we can do, what all of us can do to turn that negative into a positive, right? We found out some pretty interesting things over the last couple of years as far as the impact of design on the world, right? I mean, we all know we have an impact in people's lives. You build a home, they move in, you see the smiles, people live with that space, they love it, they cherish it, they bring up their children there. I mean, that impact, we know. We know that we touch people's lives. We've always known that about design. But there are some harder sort of facts underlying that we've not been aware of until quite recently, right? So the first is, of course, around climate change. Now, I know all of us feel some effect of climate change. I know it's hard to believe as we're here in sunny Orlando, but if you live on the West Coast, you know that Wildfires are now a part of your annual calendar. If you live on the East Coast, you know bombogenesis is coming every year. If you live in the Midwest, you know that you're having record low temperatures, but also record highs in the summer. Right? The weather of the United States is changing. We know this. 2 out of 3 Americans say that they feel the effects of climate change in their communities. It has never been the case till now, and we see that. The other big thing that we all faced and are still facing is this health crisis. I mean, I see masks here in the audience. We're all vaccinated. Of course, all of us have our green bands. We're all trying to be safe here. But we also discovered that when we have a health crisis, interiors suddenly become so important. It was all about we're all stuck indoors, we're all breathing the same air, we're wiping down the same surfaces, we're doing all of it. It's all about interiors. Again, your role as interior designers becomes so much clearer, right? And the third thing is, of course, we know that both of these things affect different communities of people differently, right? So we know, for example, that when there's flooding in the South, when there is an electricity grid crisis in Texas, when there's wildfires in California, people who don't have the resources to pick up their homes, go somewhere else, who don't have someone to move to, who don't have the networks, the connections to face those challenges, find it very hard to pick up their lives again after, right? So all of these things are also an equity issue. So we've seen those 3 things, climate, health, and equity, really touch people's lives these past 2 years, and we've learned a lot about what interior design can do in that process. By Metropolis' calculations, over the next 30 years, interior designers will end up being responsible for 1/10 of the world's carbon emissions. Okay, so that's a huge set of responsibilities that sits on our shoulders in the industry. And if you're in the kitchen and bath industry, I hate to tell you, kitchens and baths are kind of a hub for climate issues, health issues, and equity issues in the home. Kitchens and baths, just because of the amount of materials that goes into them, the budget that goes into them, are the biggest carbon footprints in any home. They are also the biggest energy users in any home. They are also places where we take care the most of our health and well-being, right? So they are really hubs of responsible design. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about what are the elements of being a designer in this day and age when we understand our responsibility in this more expanded way, right? To help us do that, we have, of course, an amazing group of panelists here. I'm going to start here with Gary. Gary, tell us a little bit about how at ASID you're understanding the impact that designers have. ASID has always said design impacts lives. Right. So what's new now, and how are you supporting designers in making a more positive impact in the world?
Thank you, Avi, and I agree with your comments. The opening here is very scary. You're absolutely right. The great thing is, as designers, we have a lot of control that we need to do. Just a little bit of background on ASID, just to help you understand where I'm coming from. I've been a practitioner for over 40 years. I tried to retire, and 2 weeks after my retirement, I got a call. Would I take this role on for 3 to 6 months? It's now been 2 years. COVID has had a major impact on my life, but as a practitioner and now as an administrator, I have seen that we have the ability to do a lot. So with our 23,000 members, which are about 50-50, 50%, 100% residential, and the other half do primarily corporate, many of them are doing both. And so many of you out there, especially in the providing product side of things, we're seeing contract firms, especially the medium, that 100 people, and smaller, doing residential, because the corporate world has to stop and reevaluate itself. We're going to use space differently than we have in the past. But residential is core, because we've all found out that that family hub, it's all flexible. You can use that kitchen counter to work. You have 2 people in every family working, generally, from home. You have kids going to school, you have dogs to take care of, and the cats on the TV and Zoom calls are crazy, but wonderful, because they keep it a little lighter. But we've also found out while that space is flexible, it's not adaptable. You can't make it private. If you have a business call or a kid that needs to really think about a project, you can't make that big open space just for them. So we're now learning that residentially we have to be both flexible, which has been the movement in the past, but now it has to be adaptable. I work in the lower level of my house. That's where my office is. The other office is upstairs. So we go different directions. Otherwise, we drive each other absolutely crazy. So that's just a bit about it. The other thing that I think is really important, and it was mentioned in our introduction, Avi and I and others have been working for over a year on bringing the interior design industry and profession up to date on health and wellness and climate. Interior designers and what all of you are responsible for doing have an impact on the individual. The box is built by the architects, whether it's a house or an office building. But what happens inside, how you feel both physically and more importantly right now mentally, is responsibility of the design industry and profession. That's us, because we deal with that individual. So to me, where our impact can be is how we treat that space. Do you feel safe when you go into your office or your home? Both physically and mentally. And that is what the pledge is all about. It's not about checking boxes. It's not about, oh, I did 10% of that and 20% of this. It's about every project I do, every product I create, I'm going to do the best I can. So it's a personal pledge, not a company pledge. I was very lucky. At NeoCon this year, we announced this pledge. It's both residential and contract. I got to be one of the first people to sign it, and I'm thrilled to be part of that, so thank you, Avi. And I think it's very important because everyone here can sign into this. It gives you guidelines, toolkits, education for both residential and contract. Residential has been ignored in many ways. It's been, I want to do it. Now we're making it, we should and must do it. So we're working very hard to bring this to all of you in a very easy way and format. So you're going to see a lot about this coming forward. So as my opening kind of, this is what we need to do, it's about take the personal pledge, whether you're a manufacturer, own a dealership, or you're a practitioner that does design. Sign up, do the right thing, and every project you have, do the minimum at least do the minimum. And sometimes you get to do the maximum. Our clients, especially in the residential market, don't understand it yet and what the impact is. However, they now do because of COVID and because of your opening statement, Kavi. We're all there. We're in that space 24/7. And if you're not ready to kill each other or the dog, you are worried about how clean it is and how to keep things under control. So I think this is a perfect time. I always say the door hasn't been opened, it's been blown off the hinges. And our industry and profession need to lead us through this. This is our opportunity, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry.
So thank you so much for that, Gary. Just a quick note, the pledge that Gary mentioned and Patty mentioned when she was making her opening remarks is available for everyone to sign at metropolismag.com/interior-design-pledge. That's metropolismag.com/interior-design-pledge. Or if that's too hard for you to remember now, catch me after the panel and I can help you sign up, okay? It really is intended to give you the resources to start making that little bit of difference project by project over time so that you can start to contribute towards, turning our work towards making a positive impact on the world. So more on that to come. I'd like to bring Valentin in here because, of course, Cosentino has been on this track for quite a while. We've been privileged to partner with them over many different resources we've developed around helping interior designers understand their responsibility. Valentin, tell us a little bit about your role at Cosentino, and also tell us about Cosentino's commitment to sustainability, and how you understand how we approach this impact that we have as a design industry.
So I have the best job in the world because I work for a company that it's my family, that it's a family-owned business, that it's very much integrated in the community, and that we have as a pillar of our strategy innovation, design, and sustainability. So what is my role there? My role there is leading a team of very talented people that it's trying to understand what's coming next, develop new solutions, inventing the future, and deliver this product to the market. It sounds like Disneyland, but it's not. It's a very tough job. And it's a very tough job because you have to match many requirements at the same time. It's not just that you have to make beautiful products, that of course you have to make beautiful products. They need to be high performance. They need to make economic sense. And it's important how you make it. And that's how you integrate all the stuff. For us, it's this sustainability part, it's integrated in a combination of sustainability with social, with economy. So you can make the most wonderful product in the world. If you don't make money, it won't be around. It won't be around for a long time. You can make a product that is super efficient, and you make a lot of money with it, but it's not sustainable because you are spending a lot of water and energy to produce that, and it won't be sustainable anymore. So making the combination of all of it, it's what really makes sense for us. And it makes sense also, Avi, for one important thing. We make innovation. Innovation is what makes that all the levelers play at the same time. But in order to make innovation, you need talent. And today you don't get talent if you are not doing the right thing. For me, it's impossible to hire people if I'm not able to convince them that they have to work hard in something that they don't believe in. And people, especially young people, doesn't want to work for companies that are not doing the right thing. So for us, this commitment with society. We are, as Patty was mentioning before, in a very small village, and we know everybody. So for us, it's not that, as you were saying before, that everything is interconnected, and maybe you have a hurricane in New Orleans because somebody is polluting the air in New Delhi. Here is that the air we are polluting is the air we breathe, the water we are polluting is the water we drink, and the people we are screwing up is our neighbors or our family. So it makes all sense that we take this very much into account. Having said all of that, it's important the why, the soul, why the company is doing that. It's important the how we are doing these things, electrical, renewable sources, reusing water as much as we can, taking advantage of all the recycled products that we have, but then it's the product, what we do, and how we can give designers and how we can give architects products that they can use. And for us, it's key that we don't put the burden of this on the shoulders of designers. So it's not that I'm going to give you a worse product, but use it because it's sustainable. It does not work. We have to figure out a way of doing that. Yeah. And for us, this is hybrid. And how you make a product that is as good as Silestone, that is as performant as Silestone, aesthetically is the same thing. You don't tell the difference. But it's much more sustainable in the way it is produced. It's safer for the industry. And it's true, it's more expensive, but we are going the learning curve faster than anybody else because we believe in that. So we don't give this over cost to customers. We are swallowing that because as a family-owned company, we are thinking in the medium-long term. And in this medium-long term, we know that we are going to be in a better position. So that's basically how we are not just talking the talk, but working the work.
Absolutely. I think, Valentin, you're absolutely right. I mean, if we know that the design industry does have this huge impact in the world, but if we want to start to shift that, we need change at every level. So we need change in manufacturing, we need change in design practices, we need change in contracting, we need change in how we use spaces. All of those things need to layer on top of each other, and we need to build partnerships, right? And so having vendors or manufacturers who do have responsible practices is such an important part of that chain. I also want to say that just when it comes to carbon, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, but when it comes to carbon emissions, if you want to build a low carbon home, the kitchen and the bath is one of the first places you should look, because it's going to be one of your larger sources of emissions. And within that, surfaces are probably your biggest hotspot when it comes to carbon emissions. David is links to that as well in a little bit in his own way, but Cosentino also has the first carbon neutral solid surface available. Like, there are options available today for you to use low carbon emissions products in your projects, and thereby at least start to prepare for the future. As you said, Valentin, like, you can't hire new talent if you don't have good sustainable practices as a company. That's going to become true of everything we all do, right? Generational preferences when it comes to responsibility towards the planet are shifting in a big way in the United States and around the world. Soon you're going to have clients who are going to ask you, oh, do you know how to build a carbon neutral kitchen? And unless you start to build that expertise today, when they start to ask you that 5 years from now, you're not going to know how. Right? So you need to start to take those first steps now in terms of starting to think about your impact and how that changes. And if your customers are not going to ask, certainly California is one day going to pass that law. And we're just waiting, right? Regulating the materials you can use in residential projects. It's going to happen, right? So we need to start preparing for that now. If you are in the vanguard of designers who knows how to deal with those things now, you're going to have a much better chance when those, not just laws fall into place, but when societal preferences change as well, consumer preferences change as well. And a big part in this, when we talk about carbon emissions, of course, choosing the right product when you're building in a new construction project is really important. But there's another big part of everything that you all do as designers, which is, of course, renovation. In the United States, residential renovation is the third largest source of urban waste, okay? Third largest in the country. Like, we are responsible for so much waste just through all the stuff we throw out in demo before even a designer comes and puts stuff into the kitchen or the bathroom, right? So one of the big things we have to figure out is how do we bring down that waste cycle, right? And then how do we then supplement that with responsible products? And David has been incredible in innovating a way for us to start to reduce the wastefulness of our work as the design industry. So David, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Refined Kitchens, and why was it important for you to start to work towards zero waste kitchens?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you to everybody else on this panel. Thank you, Avi, for moderating. Thank you to Cosentino for putting this on. I guess we've talked a lot about sort of the upstream part of the supply chain. Now we're moving a little bit more downstream in terms of the supply chain. But I just kind of want to get a sense for everybody here, like, when I say circular economy, raise your hand if you understand what I mean by that. Okay, great. All right, so that's a good majority. Just to clarify, right, we're talking about a system that is designed to be regenerative and restorative, right? So instead of the end product being waste, the end product is a resource that can be contributing to the production of the resources at the beginning of the cycle, right? So I just want to take us back to that initial value proposition, right, in terms of what we're talking about, and where Refine fits into that whole thing I'll get to in a second. But kind of who learned the 3 R's as kids? Like, who learned reduce, reuse, recycle? Okay, great. So it's kind of like I statements when you're in kindergarten and everybody says, okay, if you want to express your feelings, why don't you say, I feel X, Y, and Z? And then you grow up to be an adult and you have relationship problems because you can't say, I feel X, Y, or Z. Okay, maybe that's just me. But the thing about the 3 R's is that when we put them into practice, a lot of times we don't put them into practice, right? So it's to walk through your consumptive process with those 3 things in mind. Fundamentals, right? Super important to me. I think super important to this conversation. So reducing unnecessary consumption first and foremost, right? If it's not functionally necessary, then consider whether or not it belongs in the space. In the same way they talk about beautiful Italian chair designers who build these, monstrosities, and then they strip away all the excess to produce something like, these chairs that are in this photo, right? So it's like, producing something that at its essence performs its function beautifully. I think that's number one. Reduce and also refusing the consumption of things that you don't need. Then it comes to where I fit into this whole conversation, which is the reuse part of this part of this supply chain. And what we fundamentally do is we deconstruct. So, like this shirt says. Let's see. I don't know if anybody can read this, but it says deconstruction. Just so we're defining terms. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Deconstruction, like demolition, but zero waste. Right? So that's the goal, right? We're trying to hit zero waste. We get as close as we can, but what we do is we deconstruct. So the pictures that you see in front of you are after images of products or projects that we've done. So these are actually cabinets and surfaces that have come from other homes and then been put into these projects. And to talk about destigmatizing buying used products, it takes a supply chain that can bring this level of material to the end user, and it takes the design skill and know-how to design this without sacrificing on function, right? So that's kind of the knowledge base, the thought leadership we've been trying to create, and to help other designers learn how to do that, how to do these kinds of cabinet layouts successfully, how to find the materials, how to be good stewards of the materials, right? Which I think we can get more into. Let's see. Yeah, I feel like we've got a lot of this stuff that we can. I took a bunch of notes because I just, kind of wanted to be able to answer people's questions. But yeah, maybe we'll just kind of keep rolling and then. Yeah.
David, there are a couple of things that I would like to comment on what you just said. Yeah. No, you can hear me now. A couple of things that I would like to comment on what you said. So, no.
Folks, anybody who's handling sound, Valentin's mic is off. So.
No, better now. Okay. For example, one thing that for me it's very practical. Here in North America, we keep on installing 3-centimeter countertops, when it does not make any sense with engineering materials anymore. But we still are keeping using that. We still prefer to have non-durable products because are cheaper, and we know that it's going to be totally destroyed after 5 years, when we can have something that it's not only going to last the full life of the product, but it can even, you can give a second life to it. So I think it's this is something, a couple of tips for designers are completely applicable day one if they want to take responsible decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how deep we want to get into 2cm versus 3cm and adhesives that are used on countertops, but using a mastic versus a silicone or a construction adhesive is a big deal when it comes to reuse. Because I can't pop a countertop off if you've adhered it with something that won't come off, right? And it's like, it weighs 300 pounds. So do you really, I live in California, we have earthquakes. And I know that, your mastic's going to do just fine. In fact, because it has the elasticity, it's going to move instead of break. So, if you do use 2cm and it's going to be back to a subtop, these are like little details that, the design community could be considering and asking of their installers. In the same way you could require deconstruction on your projects, even if the state hasn't come around to requiring it in your area yet, to say, hey, we're going to choose to deconstruct before we demo, and we're going to find places and resources. And if you want those resources in your local communities, please ask me. In fact, one of the resources on the East Coast is sitting right there. Steve founded Renovation Angel. He raised his hands. There it is. So he's a resource for you all out here. So yeah, we're here, and there's lots of people who are here to participate.
This is just, it always amazes me. If you set out to say, okay, I want to do the right thing, there's so much support for you in this industry, right? And I think you find those relationships that will help you do better in your practice. Like, as you said, whether it's Refined Kitchens or Renovation Angel, there's so many resources out there. At Metropolis, we created something called the Climate Toolkit for Interior Design, which lays out these principles, in a pretty clear way. So adhesives, you have to pay attention to adhesives no matter what you're designing, right? Because adhesives are becoming such an enemy or an obstacle in reuse and recycling. So I think that's the amazing thing is design decisions, whether they are taken by designers or by contractors, whether you're detailing a feature out or you're approving something that your contractor is doing, those have a major impact in how your project actually impacts the world, right? Whether it can be deconstructed, whether it is healthy for the people who are occupying that space, right? Whether it's healthy and equitable for the people who are helping put together the space, who are constructing the space, right? So all of those things matter. So design details matter, and I think that's one of the things to take away from this. The other is there's partnerships available for you throughout this industry. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. I just want to tell everyone, thank you first of all for joining us again. It's been such a pleasure to see all of you here. We will take questions from all of you. We want to bring you into this conversation in just a few minutes. It doesn't need to be a question. You can just have a reaction. You can say, hey, you're talking big stuff. It doesn't make sense to me. Any kind of reaction you're having to what you're hearing from the stage, we want to hear from you. Help us start a conversation here. So we're going to have you join in just a second. But before we get to that point, I just want us to respond to a couple of quick prompts. For designers, a lot of us may have good intentions. We read the news. We know we should be doing the right thing by the planet. We know there's a health crisis going on. We know all this. Nobody sets out to do evil through their work, I don't think, right? But it's often hard to start those conversations, whether it's internally within your own practice or externally with clients. So what are some of the useful ways or resources that you find for designers to start the conversation around sustainability, around wellness, around health, whether it's with their own team members, whether it's with clients, or with their contractors, vendors, suppliers? Just give us some conversation starters.
Yeah, I guess I feel like there's a couple different touch points, right, that you can kind of launch from. One is individual wellness. That's how my mom got into this industry. She was a nurse, and she's like, why are people getting sicker in hospitals? That's obviously not the intended effect, right? So, and then she got in, she took the lead AP, she took the lead exam to get her accredited professional back in like early 2000s when it was engineers and architects almost exclusively. And, so that's where a lot of people access this information from. It's just like what Gary was getting at, right? It came first from a conversation around low VOCs, and now it's expanding into other things. But I think that's one place to start, is just like, what is the health consequences of the materials that you choose to be in your home? And then the second one is this quality to affordability trade-off, right? And I guess in that way, I like to equate what we do to sort of like buying a used Tesla. It's like if you were given the option of buying a luxury car, whether you like, whatever you like, but I'm going to choose the electric for obvious reasons. But if you had the choice of buying a Model X at $30,000 instead of $100,000, is it, and it's a few years old, would you do it? I know I would. So it's essentially the same idea, right? Are your clients interested in getting access to a product that they wouldn't otherwise be able to afford new? These are Pog and Pull cabinets in this kitchen that you see here. So it's like if they're not necessarily spending $200,000 on their kitchen and they're spending $75,000, $50,000 on their kitchen, then this is an option for them to get access to a material that they wouldn't otherwise have. And also to consider character and quality, right? So just the build quality of the thing that you sell and the character that it imbues. You may be able to find things that are from eras past that can be incorporated into a space and give it energy that it wouldn't otherwise have if everything's new. And I think maybe we're coming to understand that in America. I think in Europe it exists for a long time because you have structures, you have edifices that are just older and they have characteristics about them that then inform your design. And here it's like we tend to just strip everything back and build new, and maybe the conversation now is turning to like, well, could it be a yes and conversation, because sometimes shiny and new doesn't always feel as good, especially when you look at the health consequences of shiny and new. Covering your surfaces in plastic generally doesn't feel very good.
Very, very good point. To add to that, in the design profession, we all think of the big firms, the Genslers and Perkins and Wills of the world, but in reality, 80% of the architecture and design profession are in firms of under 100. And the vast majority, like 85%, is in firms of 20 or less, and most of that is firms of 1 to 5 and women-owned. So the access to information, like you said, to make a good decision, is not always easy if you're a one-man band. You don't know where to go or why. That's where things like NKBA and KBIZ come in. It's you are the network. You are the source to help us do better, and vice versa. We are the voice that hopefully can help you question what you're doing. So it's a true partnership. And that's why I think things like KBIZ is so important, and that all of the design industry comes together to ask those questions of where do I go? You just introduced us to somebody in the audience. I wouldn't have known that. So I think we need to take advantage of what we have and the resources we have and share them.
So in just a moment,
and push that out. So when you think about the number of people that are practicing what we do, who are one-man bands, we have to help, and we have to be there for them. And that's where the manufacturers and the suppliers and installers, we depend on you for your knowledge and expertise. So please share it with us.
It's very difficult for me to give you a piece of advice on that because it's really difficult. It's even difficult for us, for companies, big companies that have a lot of resources, to distinguish what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that get into the equation that just it's not like a guidebook that tells you this is better and this is worse. Because this can be better in this parameter and this can be worse in this other one. I think that it's a duty of designers, and I'm sorry to put the burden of you, that you have to get educated. And you have to learn how to distinguish who is doing just greenwashing and who is doing the right thing. And it's not easy at all. And what I just try to put you in the right path and looking at circularity, as David was saying before, also about carbon footprint, and also about the performance, durability of the product. And this is, unfortunately, this is something that you have to do your own research, and you have to get educated about yourself, because there's going to be a lot of people trying to do greenwashing about that and saying that they are doing the right thing and that they are, using renewable sources of energy, and then you realize that they have a few panels in the roof of the factory just for the lighting of the factory. Mm-hmm. So this is something that unfortunately you have to work it out hard if you want to do so. David was saying before the example of the car industry. I say the example of the food industry. Get into a supermarket as an individual consumer and try to distinguish what's right and what's wrong. It's a real challenge. With this, it's going to happen the same. It's going to be a real challenge for specifiers to decide what are the right products to use and what is the right manner to use them.
And I feel like, just to maybe try and put some answers to that question, right? So hopefully, I think maybe you're all here to try and learn some of that. Third-party, right? Third-party audited performance-based metrics, right? So looking to things that are well quantified and well researched, right? So whether the carbon calculators that exist today tend to look at operating carbon a lot of times, so how much carbon are you putting out as you use the thing, versus embodied carbon, how much carbon did it take to make the thing, the kind of thing that Valentin is dealing with directly. But it's getting better, and there are calculators out there that'll work in more specificity. Before, they were mostly available just for concrete and wood and these big broad categories. And then looking at certifications that are like that, right? Third-party audited performance-based, right? The difference between FSC versus SFI certified wood, and asking your framers or you're asking your general contractor, hey, use FSC certified wood in this project. That's an easy way to do it, right? I mean, you know that it might cost a little bit more, but if you have a client that's okay with that, or if it's, if it's marginal and you can just roll it into the budget, then great, So there are certifications out there that mean something. There are those that don't. But turning to those areas of expertise for performance-based metrics, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, we're going to open up for questions. So please start to think about what you want to bring up here in the conversation. But I just want to, to just loop together everything that y'all are saying. The great thing is the skills you need to do sustainable, positive design in the world are skills you already have as a designer, okay? Yeah. So one is, of course, first thing you need to understand that sustainable design is not a science or a mathematics problem most of the time. Once you've got through the science and the math, you'll find out that it's actually a creative problem. And that's what Valentin was talking about, and that's what Gary was talking about, is that for one project, a certain product might make sense that doesn't make sense on another project, right? You might find yourself, choosing certain ways of putting things together, certain design details on one project that don't make sense on another project, and you know that. That's true of all the work you do. If you could just copy paste design features from one client to the other, you'd be millionaires by now. So you know that design is a sensitive, creative, problem-solving activity, and that's exactly the skills we need you to bring to taking care of our planet and taking care of our health and taking care of our communities. The second thing is, some of the skills you have as a designer and as a consumer. As you walk through KBIS, there's hundreds of exhibitors here, but all of you are walking the trade show with some sense in your mind of what is good quality for you in your projects and in your work, right? That sense of quality that you've honed over time, you just need to expand that to a sense of quality from a sustainability and a health and a wellness perspective. And there's resources to help you do that. Once you get to that point, you'll know what is FSC, what is, the names and the labels will come to you, but you have to understand that, you need to develop that sense. Just like I would never specify, a material of this thickness in a high traffic space, you will know I will never specify a wood that is not FSC certified. But you need to develop that knowledge, right? And the third thing is, of course, all certifications are not made equal, just like all marketing claims are not made equal. You know that as you walk this trade show, it's the same thing in the sustainability world. The thing is to educate yourself, right? And to figure out, in this matrix, what are the right decisions to take? And there's lots of resources in the industry to help you do that. And again, happy to talk to you individually about some of them as well. But we're open for questions. If anybody has a question here, we do have a mic. I would say if you have a question, please say it into the mic so that everyone can hear it.
Hi, I'm Steve Feldman. I'm the founder and CEO at Renovation Angel, and we help pioneer the luxury kitchen recycling. So I have a question for Gary at ASID. So building recycling in as a best practice. You are a designer. You now run one of the largest trade organizations in the world for designers. What do you see as an effective way to build that best practice into the designer specific on each project?
It's something that has not been properly addressed, and I will be very open about this. It is not something that's discussed openly, and it must. So I think the very first thing is that we educate and expose the design community to that opportunity. Many of us didn't know that that was even an option. Our contractors just took everything, ripped it out, and threw it away. Now we can tell them, these are the rules. So we need to put that together and educate and expose the entire design community, not just our members, but everyone involved in design needs to be aware that there are other options other than the trash can. Just like now in our rooms, we have a space to put paper in that plastic container, and then we have the thing where you throw the dirty tissue in. We have to understand that there are opportunities, and we haven't done that. The interior design profession has failed, and that's why Avi and ASID started working together on this, because we realized we need to be there. So, very good question, and we have a long way to go. So I'll talk to you separately. I want your card.
I think it's still morning.
Yes.
My name is Stacia. I run a kitchen and bath showroom in the Philadelphia area. The first thing that comes to mind when I'm hearing this is, yes, great. Where do I put the stuff? You know, so are you recommending, there's many levels to this. So as a showroom, I think about my basement as the good idea graveyard. You know, I want to save that piece of molding, that cabinet, that mislabeled. But I'm finding it's accumulating, right? So, the reality is that, is there any advice in terms of, what to do with these materials, in terms of our projects, and or resources that for this demolition, because you're right, it's going in the dumpster, and I try to save as much as I can, but again, it's just accumulating. So I'd love to know about kind of a preliminary step, if I could.
Yeah. So each kind of local area has different resources. There's Construction Junction, which is in Pittsburgh. I mean, not close enough to you. But there's, so like we'll start with the 800-pound gorilla. Habitat for Humanity does their own deconstruction in some communities. In other communities, they don't. Sometimes coordinating with them can be very challenging, right? They're a large nonprofit. Getting trucks on and off of job sites on time can be really challenging. That's a link in the supply chain that we've personally tried to solve. We do our own deconstruction work for that reason, so we can steward the materials through this carefully. But if you do have storage space where you can accumulate some materials and you can delay those pickups, then you may be able to schedule with them for other moments. And there are other nonprofits. Like in our area, there's Father Joe's Villages, Brother Benno's, there's a few different ones. They will take these materials. Creating that knowledge share can be a challenge depending on where you are. But we've managed to find, like Humble Designs is another good one for furnishings. So if you're looking to donate mattresses or chairs, tables, etc. They do decoration and furnishing for people transitioning out of homelessness. So just to keep people in a space that feels like home. So there are resources available, and I think it is unfortunately at this time that just the knowledge isn't as readily available. So I think it's kind of like finding those partners, and then. In terms of staging those materials, depending on where you are, depends on how expensive land and space is, right? But if you just have small lots of things and you can store them in a small area, then yeah, I would look to schedule those deliveries, either have your contractor take them directly from the job site to drop off. Instead of doing a dump run, like we have a dump trailer, we just don't use it for dumping things generally. We just put our stuff in it and we take it to whatever nonprofit it's going to. So you can just ask them to transition their process a little bit and send it to a different location.
But maybe that's one of the things, Avi, we add to the pledge is a resource library, because, right, I wouldn't know where to go except Habitat for Humanities in my area. So maybe we start a regional listing of possible resources. I've never heard that before. I think that's a very good idea, because if you don't know, you're just going to become a hoarder, and then we're going to watch you on one of those horrible shows on TV. So we don't want to do that. But I think that maybe we start a resource list as part of it. By the way, definitely go to Metropolis website and look for this. ASID website has a direct link to it also. It's free, it's open to everybody, but please look at it and sign up.
And just one last thing, if you're on the West Coast, there are deconstruction contractors up and down the West Coast who specifically do this, right? Okay. Just like what I do, but they don't do the other end of the cycle, right? The design into spaces, but they will deconstruct and take to nonprofits. The Bay Area has a bunch, Portland has a bunch, Seattle has a few, Vancouver has a few. So reach out, I'm happy to give my information to anybody who has questions. I'll give you their names.
Yeah.
Good question.
Do we have any other questions? In the back there?
Just continuing with the deconstruction, it's always educating your contractor. They're just like, oh, well, we'll pay for, this is a cost for the dumpster that your client pays for. So I guess this will impact the homeowner, but educating them on the importance of sustainability and reusing materials such as countertops and cabinetry. But I think it's a whole cycle of education for everyone in the process. But I live in Nashville, and I don't think there's any deconstruction contractors out there, but I'll have to Google that.
Yeah. The other thing to consider when you're making that pitch, a deconstruction tends to be a pretty easy pitch, because there's, any nonprofit, when they take an in-kind donation, if they're a 501c3, they can give you a receipt that's tax deductible up to $5,000 for that building material donation. If you get it appraised, it can be well above that. So you could be looking at tens of thousands of dollars in tax write-offs for your clients, depending on the kind of materials they're donating. And so then you say, okay, you spend an extra few $100s on the front end if it's a kitchen to have it done this way by a professional deconstruction contractor. And then you don't landfill it. And in the end, you're going to end up netting money, right? You end up making money by doing this process. So People Planet Pocketbook.
Absolutely.
When you think about everything we rip out and throw away, when we remodel every 8 to 10 years, and or upgrade or whatever we want to call it, and I'm just thinking of sinks and toilets and hardware that we throw away that could easily be reused. And Europe is much ahead of us, by the way, in this. It's just kind of natural, built in to the lifestyle, and maybe that's that history thing that you brought up, Avi, whereas we're still even a couple hundred years old, but that's new. And so I think that that's a mind change that we have to do in North America, is start thinking about this has another life beyond my one purpose. So I think it's a great opportunity to do exactly what you're doing.
And I think as a designer, you're not going to be able to use 100%, we hope we get there, but you're not going to be able to use 100% reused material or recycled material on every project. So there's really two sides to this coin too. It's like when you're reuse as much as possible, and when you're using new material, make sure you're using it in a way that it is reusable, right? So you want to also be the seed for the next cycle, right? This is something, again, I don't know how many, if there are any architects in the audience, forgive me, but interior design and everybody in the interior design industry, we really work in a very different kind of industry because of that 8 to 10 year renovation model. You have to know when you're designing a space, please don't design it assuming that it's going to be a forever space, because it is not. The reality is right now, it is not. Any space you design 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, another designer is going to come in and have to deal with what you've designed, right? So it's also a responsibility we have to each other in the industry. We really pass the baton between each other. That's the contract we have with each other as professionals. And if we can be a good seed and seed our projects with good materials, with good practices, screws, not glues, as much as possible, pick your glues carefully, like there's some basic principles, and then you can be a good seed for that next cycle. So I think it's really important, as we're talking about reuse and recycling, to understand that there's many parts of this conversation, but that we do have the power to make the change there. Any other thoughts and comments before we get a last round of okay, they're right in the back, and then we're going to close out here. But of course, we're available to you for any individual conversations as soon as we get off the stage.
Hi, what are some of your favorite resources as far as educating yourself about making better choices or finding new materials or things in the market you didn't know about that are eco-friendly?
I'm sorry, I know I'm not a panelist. Can I take this one first?
Go for it. You know more than any of us.
Okay. So if you're thinking about climate and carbon impacts, I would urge you to go to metropolismac.com. I know this is a plug. It's not shameless because a lot of people were involved in creating this resource. Metropolismac.com, you can find it pretty easily, a climate toolkit. And the climate toolkit has a resources section. It's called Get Help. So there's a list of resources for you in terms of product specification, carbon calculation. We're going to add, reuse and recycling resources to that, as well as to the pledge. So that has a pretty good list of resources. I would say off the top of, just as a quick reminder, so the Healthy Building Network has a very nice website that's called Home Free. And it tells you basically what decisions to take when you're making. So for instance, if you clicked on their section on adhesives, it'll tell you, here are all the adhesives that are available. Here are the pros and cons of each one. And it's super nice just to go through and educate yourself, okay? There's mindful materials.
Yes.
If you're looking specifically to get to real level of detail, like how much recycled content is in this material or whatever. So that's a great resource as well. But and then, I would say for any material you're looking at, you want to look at whether it has an EPD or an HPD, as Valentin mentioned.
And I would like to add to that, Evi, because I think that my piece of advice from a company point of view is that you need to be very demanding. You have to be very inquisitive with companies. Ask for information. Be very insistent on that. And I know I'm throwing stones against my own roof, but it's something that it's going to make companies to raise the level, to do the right thing. So ask what's the carbon footprint and how it is calculated. Ask where's the origin of the raw materials, when they are coming from, and how much transportation is involved. We have this EPD and this HPD, where you can just look under the nails in your fingers. You can look everything, where the materials are sourced, how much energy it takes to source them, how much energy is taken in the process, how much is coming from renewable sources and whatnot. So what I'm asking you is that you are very demanding with companies. Companies in 21st century needs to be transparent. We need to be audited by customers, and this is your role there.
Valentin, I'll just add to that. Yes, absolutely, you need to be demanding, but you need to have someone to make that demand off. And time and again, when I speak to interior designers or interior design professionals who have been successful in integrating sustainable practices into their work, the first thing they say is their biggest resource is other people.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, there are calculators and there are tools and whatever, but really build those relationships with your local vendors. Like if you go to a kitchen and bath store all the time, start to talk to them about sustainability, because you will find that, you know, they might know more about certain parts of that conversation, right? So if you talk to them and you're saying, hey, I'm like, yes, I know we're looking at all these materials. Can I also look at some materials that are sustainable? Do you have any materials that have recycled content in them? Are there any companies that are making good claims that you stock, right? Just start to do that, because really once when the person you're doing business with knows that this is one of your interests as a buyer, as a specifier, as a consumer, they'll start to cater to you. And that's really one of the big resources, you know, beyond any toolkit, which of course, you know, there are many, any database, any whatever, is to build those one-on-one relationships. I know that's hard, it takes time, but it's really the best way forward, because information in this area changes all the time. And if you in your area find your David, you know, who you can get on the phone and be like, hey, I'm working with this project, I need to renovate this kitchen, I don't know what to do with the materials, and they can help you with that, that's better than going to any website or any resource. So, you know, people are important.
And I totally 100% agree with Avi, and just other databases, just because he's made a great one, and you know, if you're doing preliminary research before you have those conversations. International Living Futures Institute,
oh, yes.
LFI, is a great leader in this place. If you really want to get in the weeds on stuff, go read their red list. I don't know how much chemistry you know. I don't know enough to understand most of it, but it is great. It is really, really great. And they also do a certification called the Living Building Challenge, which is pretty much the leader at this moment in terms of sustainable building. And if you're passionate about this space, there are others. Obviously, most people are familiar with LEED. There's LEED for Homes. The organization that runs LEED has another one called WELL that's specifically targeted towards health and wellness in the home. There's Passive Home, which is energy efficiency standards, and you know, so they'll give you lots of recommendations for speccing HVAC systems, ventilation, air sealants, air barriers. So I guess those are just to name a few. Also natural construction resources we can get into if you want to talk about clay plasters and cool non-paint-based materials. Yeah.
And getting involved in some of those organizations, I'm on the board of WELL. I think it's one of those things, or IWBI, it's very refreshing to me because you have a say and you can help change the world. All of you can do that. And remember, if the design side in this room, it's a two-way street. When we demand or request that the manufacturers and suppliers provide sustainable products and then don't specify them, oh, it costs a little bit more, I'm not going to do that, that's on us. We have to also participate in this. It's a two-way street. So we have to be demanding. I agree with that 100%, but we also have to then do the right thing and specify the right materials.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I can't think of a better set of last piece of advice for our audience. So I think we're going to close here. That's about the time we have. However, please feel free to talk to us about resources or questions you have. We're here to help you. We want to make this positive change in our industry. And we can. As designers, we have impact over 10% of the world's carbon emissions. We have a direct impact over people's health. We have an impact over communities and how healthy our communities are. It is in our power to start making a difference. So if you're interested in doing that, we have resources available now. Let's start. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And thank you to our panelists for all the amazing insights. And of course, thank you to KBIS and Cosentino for providing this platform to us. Thank you all.
Thank you.